Welcome everybody to TechCraft. This is Rob, and today's video is part 4 of my step-by-step beginner's guide to iOS shortcuts. In today's video, we're going to learn all about scripting. Let's go. If you haven't seen the first 3 parts of this series yet, make sure you check those out and I'll link them up above. We're going to dive straight in today to talk about scripting and about user input. And we're going to work through 3 different shortcuts, which I think will highlight all the cool scripting and user input features. Let's go. So we'll start with something reasonably simple, which is this shortcut here, the favorite location shortcut. And actually, let me show you how this looks if we run it from the home screen. So here it is in my widget, and I'm just going to press favorite locations here. And it's popped up 3 locations that I have decided are my favorite ones: my work, my Five Guys for a burger, and Liverpool Street Station, which I travel into quite a bit. So if I click on this, it will bring up this map of driving instructions for me to get to Liverpool Street. And obviously you can add any address you want to this list. Let's see how this is built. Okay, so I'm back here in Shortcuts, and I've deleted everything from this shortcut apart from the actual input. And what I've got here is a dictionary where the keys are my location names and the values are the actual postcodes. And you can use full street addresses here if that makes more sense where you are. The first thing I want to do is prompt for which of these we want to travel to. And that's really easy. We can use the choose from list. Now, there is a choose from menu action here. I don't find that particularly useful. Let me drag that in and just explain why. So all the options here are hard-coded. It's not taking the options from the dictionary. And this block as a whole doesn't have any return value. It doesn't say return which item you chose. You have to put the individual items of code inside each block. So let me show you what I mean by that. If I just bring in a show alert option here, and drop that into 1. So if I choose 1, this alert will fire. If I choose 2, nothing will happen. Let's press play. I'm going to choose 2. Okay, it returns the input, which is our dictionary. If I press play again and choose 1, this time I get the alert. This is kind of hokey because I don't want to have to, every time I add a new location, add a new item to this menu and add a new block. So I'm going to scratch that, delete all the actions, and we're going to use the choose from list, which is a little bit easier to run with when you have this kind of data-driven shortcut. And I can go straight with choose from dictionary and get quite a nice user interface. So if I press play, when I run it here, I get these labels and I get the kind of like the value, which is the corresponding thing here, which gives a nice interface. And if I run this in the widget, then what I get is just the keys themselves. So that you don't have to mess around. This is quite nice. And this is one of the powerful things, I think, of shortcuts, is that you get quite a nice default user interface just straight out of the box for most of the data types. So now that if we run this, let me just show you what it actually returns. So what it returns is the actual postcode. So we don't even need to mess around trying to get into the dictionary to get the postal code. We can straight away use the show directions action, drag that in, show driving directions to chosen item. Brilliant. If I press play now and choose Liverpool Street Station, there we go. It's giving me the directions to Liverpool Street Station. Amazing. I mean, 3 actions and we have a really nice shortcut that we can use. And I really am kind of enamored by how the user interface actions work. I'd like to say that there's more to say about them, but there really isn't. There are other things you can do, like prompt boxes, which we've seen already, and you can send alerts and so forth. But these kind of action menus, for me, are what I think are the most common user interface elements in shortcuts. So what I want to do now is switch over and take a look at scripting, and we'll see some more user interface elements as we do this. And what I really want to do is build on the shortcut that we saw from part 3, where we were showing the location of a particular photograph. Let's go. Okay, so we're back in Shortcuts and we have an empty shortcut here. And what we're going to do is build a shortcut that will prompt us to select some photographs, find which of those photographs have a location attached to them, and then ask us which one we'd like to see on a map. Okay, so let's get started. And what I want to do is bring in a find photos action here. And I have a particular album that I'd like this to run from, which is the Shortcut Sundays test album. And I'm not limiting this, so this is going to show me all photos in that album. We can just press play to see what that looks like. So quite a few images in here. Okay, cool. Now, not all these images have a location attached to them. So what we need to do is run through this list and filter out the ones that have no location. And for that, we're going to use 2 of the most important scripting actions. We'll use a repeat to do the looping part, and we'll use an if to do the decision part. You can find all of your kind of control flow things up here. And what we want to do is bring in a repeat action. And actually, there are two types of repeat. Repeat will just repeat a fixed number of times, and repeat with each will repeat with each item in a list. Far, far more useful. Let's bring that in. And what this is happening now is it's just going to loop over every photograph in this list and execute whatever code, whatever scripting actions we put in the middle here. So what I want to do first is maybe just show you what happens if we try to get the location for each of the photographs in that list. So if I get details of image, which is this one here, and the detail I want is location, and okay, press play. So we've got 6 items returned here, and if I just now take that out and just see how many images we had, we've got about 9 or 10 images there. So what's happening is, because not all of these have a location, the list, when it has an empty value, just ignores that. And we're going to take advantage of that filtering capability to get rid of the photographs. So let's bring an if statement in here. And we want to say, if the location of the repeat item has some value, then keep it, otherwise get rid of it. And notice that already we've got this special variable here, repeat item. And if you remember back to part 2, I said that there are some variables we hadn't covered yet, and it's these particular repeat and repeat index variables, which we'll see shortly. And the value of this will change every loop. Every time we go around this loop, this is the photograph or the whatever list item for that iteration of the loop. Okay. What I want, though, is the location, so I can click on this. It's already a photo, and I'm going to just pick location. So remember, this is how we can get properties of an item directly. We don't have to throw in another action for this. And I'm just going to say, has any value. So if the location has any value, this block of code will execute. Otherwise, this block will execute. And I can get rid of the otherwise block if I want. But what I actually quite like is, just to be precise, is to just drag in an action called nothing, put that here, and make it clear to myself later on that I'm actually doing nothing in this block. And then I'm going to, we want to keep the photograph here, and there's no handy way of just saying, I want the result of this block to be whatever repeat item we had here. So we're going to use repeat index. So I'm going to say get item from list. So I want to get a very specific item from the list, and the list is this list of photos here. So let's change that first of all to the photos. And it's not the first item, it's the item that a particular index. And the index we want is our repeat index. So it's worth revisiting what we're doing here. We're going to loop over every photograph in the list in our album. We're going to say if the location of that photograph has any value, then get that photograph out of the list. Otherwise, do nothing. And what I'm expecting to see now is a list of photographs that all have a location. Let's press play. Great. So we now only have our photographs with a location attached to them. Next thing to do is show these in a list and pick the one we want to show on the map. So I'm going to use choose from list. And press play to show you how that looks. And we get a nice user interface here. This, again, is just the power of how the user interface components work in Shortcuts, is that it shows the actual image. I could pick this one saying, okay, fine, now we just need to show in maps. Let's just drag that on here. So that will show the chosen item in maps. And just notice that all these things are sticking together. And as a reminder from previous times, if you long press and click select magic variable, you can see where all the different magic things come from. Let's press play and see how this works. Pick that one. Okay, great, that's in the Seychelles. Let me just show you a small bug though. If I go back and press play and pick this photograph here, nothing happens. This was a photograph I took in Shenzhen in China, and Maps does not have particularly good data coverage in China. So what I'd like to do is filter out those images that I think that Maps can't actually render, and then we actually get a nicer experience. So we can use another repeat and another if block. Before we do that though, I want to just tidy this up a little bit because this is quite messy. So the first thing I'm going to do is bring in a set variable here, drop this in here, and we'll set this to the photos. And I'm going to change this to be the photos and this to be the photos. Okay, so now we know we're using this variable. And what I really want to do is, get rid of that for now, is update the variable after that step. Okay, so now I know that my photos are have been filtered out by those that have a location. Let's repeat this process and filter it out again, finding the ones that have a location in China. So we'll bring in a repeat with each action again over the photos, which is great. And now to filter out by location is kind of difficult. It's hard to know which location field the word China will appear in. You'd think it would appear in country. It actually doesn't. So one thing we can do, if you remember from part 3, is there's quite powerful type coercion. We can move between locations and text, for example, is we can just get the whole location object as if it was text and just look for the word China inside it. Let's do that. So I'm going to bring in a match text action here. And I want to match, not in repeat item, but in the location of repeat item. Click done. And I'm going to just look for the word China. So I can literally just type China in here. And that's great. So what I want to do is if we match here, then this is a photograph that we're discarding. If we don't match here, this is a photograph that we're keeping. So we'll bring another if statement in. Drag this down here. So if matches has any value, then that is a photograph that we are discarding. So we will do nothing. So we'll do nothing. If matches doesn't have a value, then this is a photograph that we're keeping, and we're going to use the same thing that we did up here, get item at index. Get item from list, drag that into the otherwise block. From the photos, we want item at index, and the index is the repeat index for this loop. Now we can press play and see if this works. I'm expecting this to have filtered out quite a few images now. Okay, cool. So we're down to 4 images now. This one, that one, and that one. Interestingly, this one is also taken in Shenzhen, but it just has the word Asia in the list, and that can be displayed on the map, which I thought was quite interesting. Okay, so let's just finish this off now. So we need to bring in a choose from list again. From the repeat results. Let's press play and see what happens with that. Okay, great. So we can now see just the 4 items. Let's pick that one there. And now the final thing is to show in maps. And we want to choose to show the chosen item in the map. Let's press play. I'm going to pick the one here in the Seychelles. And there we go, we brought up the Seychelles again. So I find that repeat and if together are great at this kind of filtering workflow. And it's very important if you're trying to build a good shortcut that you take out most of the invalid data, if not all of the invalid data, before you present it to your user. So this is a very important part of the workflow. What we can also use repeat for, though, is to do bulk actions. And I want to now show you a shortcut that I really like, which is a bulk image resizer. Let's see how that works. So we're back here now with a blank shortcut. And the first thing I want to do is bring in a select photos. Because I want to be really good about this from the beginning, I'm going to put a set variable in here. I'm going to call that the photos. And you'll see why I do this very shortly. I'm going to expand show more here, and I want to make sure that select multiple is enabled. This is a bulk resizer, so we want to be able to select multiple photographs. Okay, cool. So the next thing is I want to prompt the user for how big the longest side of the image should be. So we're going to use another user interface component called ask for input. We've seen this one a few times so far. I'm just going to say how big. And if I expand show more, what we've seen so far in parts 1, 2, and 3 is just text input, but I'm going to use numeric input here. And the default value I want to be 1024. Always, if you can provide a default, it makes not just your debugging life easier, but it makes your user's life easier as well. So that's brilliant. If I just show you what the user interface looks like so far, I'm asked for some photographs. So if I scroll down to my test album here and maybe just select a few of these, and notice these are different orientation, and that is part of what I want to handle it in the shortcut. Click done. How big? Fine. So we get our how big, and I'm going to set that as a variable. Let's call that size. So the next thing I want to do is start looping over these photographs and actually resizing them. And obviously for a loop, we know we need a repeat because we're looping over a list. It's a repeat with each. Let's drop that in there. And what I want to do is not with each item in size, is each item in the photos. And I want to resize along the longest edge. So I need to find out which edge is longest. And if we want to make a decision, we just use the if. So I'm going to drop that if in here. So I want to get the width and the height of the photograph. So I'm going to click on here and try to pick up that property. Now, what happens is it's detected the type of repeat item as a number. I never quite figure out why this is. We know that the photos is a list of photos. So we know that the repeat item should be a photo or an image. So I can click on the type here and I can actually tell Shortcuts that this should be an image. And then I can get the width from it. Click done. And now it's width. This is numeric. So we get a lot more conditions this time in our if statement. We're not just checking if it has or does not have a value. We can do number type things. So this is the power of the conditional and the power of the data types working together. This is a number, so we can do numbery things. And I want to say if the width is greater than the height, and we have to repeat this whole process again of setting the type to be image and choosing height. Click done. I'm going to resize along the width. So we'll get a resize image action. This is great. So the image we're resizing is the repeat item. This is what we want to resize. It's the width, and we want that to be size. And we're just going to leave the height as auto. And then we'll repeat the same thing in the otherwise block, but we'll resize the height instead and leave the width to be automatic. So get rid of that. Go into auto height and choose size. So this is basically what I want to happen. I want these to be resized. This is looking quite nice. I'm going to press play. Choose my photographs. 1024 is fine. And there we go. We have resized images. Now you can't see that, and I'm going to show you a little bit more clearly in a second by making this very small. But there are a few more things I want to do to this. First, when I'm debugging this, constantly selecting the photographs is a real pain. So because we've made a variable called the photos, and the rest of the shortcut is using that variable everywhere, not the magic variable, we can change what the value is. So I'm going to drop a find photos in here, get rid of that, set that variable to be just what we come from find, and choose my album here. I don't want a limit, I want them all. This means that now when I press run, I don't have to go through that whole selection process, and it will resize every image in that album. This is a very useful pattern when you are debugging and working on a shortcut. And then later on, I can just go back and switch this back to the select. Before I do that though, I have a few more things that I want to do to this shortcut. And one of those is actually set up somewhere to save these images to. So here I am in the Photos app, and I've created this album called Resized, and it's currently empty. And what I want to do is every time I run a bulk resize, I want to save the photos to this album. So back in Shortcuts now, what we're going to do is chuck a save to photo album action at the bottom here. We want to save the repeat results because we know that's a list of images. And I don't want to save this to my recents album. I want to save this to my resized album that I selected earlier. So if I press play now, remember we've still got the find photos action, so we don't need to actually select any. I'm going to save these as 128 so we can see how small they go. There we go. That's the output there. But if I switch to photos, you can see I've got a lot of very small images, but they've all been resized along their longest edge. I can bring that one up there. It really zoomed in there. Okay, cool. One more thing I want to do is actually make it so that if I'm inside the Photos app, I can just click on one of these and then in the share sheet, auto resize it. So let's add that to our shortcut as well. So I'm back in Shortcuts and I've re-added our select photos action here. And what I'm going to do is click next to save this, and then we're going to make this shortcut appear in the share sheet. So I'm just going to call this BR for bulk resize. Click done. Now bring up the three dots again, and we're into the shortcut properties. This shortcut will already show in the widget, and when I run it from the widget, I want that select photo UI to show up. And I also want to be able to run it from the share sheet, passing in a specific image. It's already got the share sheet types as images, but normally what you'll see is that it has all of them selected. If I press deselect all and then press images, That's the type that I want. Okay, cool. That I think is fine. So now that the shortcut is appearing in the share sheet, we have this accepts, and that tells us we accept an image. And you'll remember from part 2 that this means there's now a special variable called shortcut input. And if we have that, we want to use that. Otherwise, we want to do the select. So let's bring an if statement in. Already picks up shortcut input as the value we're testing. So if that has any value, then we will set a variable, which is the photos, to be that. Otherwise, I just want to do these actions here. So I'm just going to drag them into here. So this means if we don't have a shortcut input, we'll prompt for the photographs. Otherwise, we'll use the shortcut input. So I can press done. And let's just run this from the Photos app. So I've cleared out my resized album, and I'm going to just go and pick a photograph from, say, here. And I'll choose this one. To resize it, I'm going to click on the share sheet. I'll scroll down until we see our BR shortcut here. Press that. How big do we want it to be? We'll say 64, very small. Click OK. And that's done. So if we go back to our resized album now, we can see there's our resized photograph. So as you've seen from this video, the scripting features and the user input features are actually fairly simple to use inside of Shortcuts, but they are really powerful. I think it's really the scripting and the user input that brings together everything we've seen so far and makes it usable in real world, kind of useful workflows and useful shortcuts without being able to make decisions, without being able to change what you do based on the size of your input lists or the size of your input dictionaries. You can't really do anything powerful, but having those extra features really unlocks the power of shortcuts. I really hope that you found this video useful, and I hope you found it entertaining. If so, please hit like, please hit subscribe, and don't just hit subscribe, but hit the bell as well so you don't miss out on any future content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.